Okay, good news to start with. I trapped my cat in my bedroom, so she's not going to be interrupting us today. Thanks for bearing with that on Monday and Tuesday. Today we're going to talk about evaluating your sources, which means checking them to make sure that they're good sources to use. So, not everything that we find online is necessarily a good source to use in research. We know this. There are a lot of ways that people can manipulate information online, and then also it can just be straight up lies. So we need to make sure when we're looking at sources that we're not just taking it for granted that they're good sources to use or that the information that they have in the sources is accurate. Part of how we can avoid finding sources that are inaccurate is by using the library databases. Having information in the database means that it's more likely to be credible. It's more likely to be a source that people use for research, but even still, we need to go through the process of checking it for ourselves to make sure that it'll work for our project. So when you're evaluating sources, we're going to look for 5 different pieces to make sure that it'll work. First, the currency. Currency means not like dollars currency, it means like how current is the source. The relevance, is it related to the question that you're trying to answer? The authority, does the person who wrote it have the authority to be talking about this? The accuracy, is the information in the source accurate? And finally, the purpose of the source, so that we can determine if it meets our purpose. If the source doesn't pass this test, it is, get it? C-R-A-A-P, crap. So we're checking to see if the sources are crap, and if they are, then we're not going to use them. So just to go over a little bit more, again, currency is how current the source is, or when was it published? Has it been revised or updated? Does your topic require current information, or could you use an older source? If you're researching something that happened in 1850, maybe it's okay to use a source that was published in 1960. If you're researching something that happened in 2016, and then we got new information about whatever happened in 2018, you probably want a source that's from 2018 or later. Relevance is how important the information is to meet the question that you're answering. And in this case, we're looking at, does the information relate to your topic? Does it answer your question? And also, are you the intended audience for the source? Is it an appropriate reading level for you? Will you be able to read the whole thing? Authority is who is the source of the information. So who is the author or publisher? What are the author's credentials? What organizations are they a part of? Are they qualified to write on the topic? And the easiest way to do this is just to open up a new tab and Google the name of the author and see what you can find out about them. Accuracy is the source reliable? Is it truthful? Is it correct? Like, is the information correct? Where does the source come from? Has the information been reviewed? A lot of times, if you're finding sources that are in databases, the information has been reviewed. Is the source biased, or does it have a bias towards or against something? And just because a source is biased does not mean that you can't use it. Most sources have some sort of bias, which is okay. We're not trying to find sources that are entirely unbiased. We're trying to make sure that we ourselves can recognize the bias so that we're aware of it as we're using that information. And finally, purpose. Why does this information exist? Who is putting it out there? Is it somebody who is putting information out there because they are going to try to convince you to buy a product? If that's the case, then maybe you're less likely to trust the information. So you're going to complete the CRAP test for each of your 2 sources. I'm going to go over a model really quickly, and then you'll be working on this over the next week. So you're going to use this test to evaluate each of your sources before deciding to use them to answer your essential question. Answer each of the questions in the boxes with as much detail and thoroughness as you can, because what you write in these boxes, you'll be able to take and translate, just copy and paste over into your annotated bibliography. So it's going to save you tons of time. So first, just the basic source information, title of the source. So I'm using the first article that we read, From Parkland to Sunrise. Remember that article titles go inside quotation marks. Author of the source is Emily Witt. It was originally published in the New Yorker. Newspaper and magazine titles are italicized. It was published February 13th, 2019, and here is the URL. So that's just basic information to include. Currency. So I talked about how the source was written in February 2019, and it was going over events of the previous year since February 2018 when the Parkland shooting happened. And the most important thing that I thought was necessary to note is that there hasn't been another major school shooting since Parkland. So the information in the source seems like it is up to date enough for my topic. Maybe if there had been another major school shooting since Parkland, which thank God there hasn't been, but maybe if there had been and then the United States passed like a super strict gun control law, this source wouldn't be up to date anymore, but it is. For relevance, I talked about how the source relates to the essential question that I'm trying to answer. And then I also talked about how I checked that it was an appropriate reading level for me. I just skimmed the first page. I saw there are only like 2 words that I would need to define. So I know that it's a good reading level for me. I'll also include information for how to check the Lexile level. Lexile is a way to measure the reading level of a piece. And if you are using a source on ProQuest, it's possible to use Lexile. So I'll have directions linked here for you to use if you're using ProQuest. Authority, so I looked up Emily Witt, the author. I found out that she is a journalist for the New Yorker, so she writes for them regularly. She went to Columbia University in New York for investigative journalism, and I know that Columbia University's journalism program is like really strong, so that's a mark in her favor. And then I saw she's published a lot of articles in the New Yorker and other like reputable news sources, so I think she is qualified to write about this. For the accuracy, so is there a bias or towards or against something? So first, just to note, bias is the noun. So you have a bias towards or against something. Biased, ed, is the adjective. So you would say you are biased towards or against something. So even though Witt doesn't say this, I would say the article is fairly biased toward more liberal causes. A lot of the causes that she talks about the students participating in are causes that we would associate with liberal ideas versus conservative ideas in the United States. And the way that she talks about it makes it sound like what the students are doing is a good thing, which makes me think that it's biasing more that way. That doesn't mean that I can't use this article. It just means it's important for me to recognize that. And then finally, the purpose of the source, I said, is to inform the audience about how teens can be involved in the political process, even if they're not old enough to vote, which is answering my essential question. And then finally, you want to find a juicy quotation from your source that could help you, sorry, I'm distracted, activists. Okay, that's underlined in red. That means I made a spelling error. I didn't even do this on purpose, but this works out because I wanted to mention this. You need to make sure that your spelling, punctuation, grammar, and everything is perfect in here so that you can just copy and paste it over into your annotated bibliography. So if you see any words that are underlined in this squiggly red line, you want to right click and then you want to fix the spelling. Do it now so that you don't have to go back and do it later. Make sure you're using complete sentences, periods, capitalizing appropriate. Okay, so you want to find one juicy quotation if you were writing an essay that you could use in the essay. Remember, we're not writing an essay, but if you were, what's a really juicy quote where you could squeeze a lot of ideas out of it in order to answer the question? And as always, you're going to put it in quotation marks, and then you have the author's last name and the page number, and I just counted the pages on the printout, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's it for evaluating sources. So what you learned today for the CRAP test is going to be helpful for you for all 4 years of high school. You're doing the exact same thing that the 12th graders did like 2 weeks ago on their major research project. So this is pretty cool that you're learning it now, and then you'll have that skill for when you get to high school and definitely for college level research. So for the rest of today and on Friday, you're just looking for your first source and you're doing a quick check to make sure the source will work, and then you're printing it out and annotating it in OneNote. And then Monday or Tuesday of next week is when you'll be completing this CRAP test for your first source. Stay in touch. Email me if you have any questions. Bye, everybody.